Hello my friends and welcome to the channel. In this one we are going to do a quick crash course on CSS. I previously did a crash course on HTML, so if you don't know HTML or you want to do a quick brush up on your HTML, you can check out that crash course. I'll leave a link in the description to that. Okay, but I should probably say that my website Xenotrust Academy, if you go there you would find a comprehensive course on building website with HTML, CSS and Sass that will take you from the beginner to the advanced levels. Okay, so if maybe you perhaps want a more structured and a more detailed course, then you should probably check that out. All right, I also have a course on JavaScript that will be interesting for you if you want to sharpen your JavaScript skills. All right, thank you so much if you're going to take the course. Thank you so much for supporting me, and let's get started. So we previously looked at HTML, right? HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language, and we said that HTML is what we use to build the structure of a web page. Okay, in this one we're going to look at CSS, and CSS actually stands for Cascading Style Sheets. Okay, and basically CSS is responsible for styling a web page. Okay, so basically with CSS we can define the styles and layout of the page we created using HTML elements. Okay, and with CSS we can add things like color, font size, background color, background images. We can specify the space between elements. We can even add animations to our web page with CSS. So CSS is something that, it's amazing. It's something that makes building website really fun. Okay, and that's what we're going to cover in this project. So in the next one we're going to start looking at the CSS syntax. So what we're going to do is, let me minimize my browser, and I'm going to create a new folder on my desktop. So let me quickly do that, and I'm going to call that folder CSS. Okay, all right, next what I'm going to do is I'm going to open Visual Studio Code. So I'll just do Visual, and I'll just open a fresh Visual Studio Code, and it's open but in another tab here. Okay, so this is a blank Visual Studio Code. All right, now like we did in the previous HTML lecture, I'm just going to drag this CSS folder inside of this Visual Studio Code. Okay, so I'll just drop it there and it will open up inside of Visual Studio Code. All right, so permit me to stack my Visual Studio Code to the left of the screen, and on the right I'm going to just open a browser. Okay, Chrome browser to be specific. All right, so now we have Chrome browser opened and we have Visual Studio Code open. So I'll close this getting started, and inside of this my CSS folder that is open here, I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call it index.html. okay, great. So I'm going to be working with this index.html, right? So it's expected that you know HTML, right, before you take this CSS crash course. Okay, you need to know HTML. So I'm going to use Emmet to create a HTML template. Okay, so this is what the boilerplate for a HTML it looks like. Okay, we have the head, the body, and everything just set from Emmet. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a paragraph. Okay, so I'll just add a paragraph like so, and inside this paragraph I'll say this is a paragraph. All right, so I'm going to right click and I'll open with Live Server. And if you don't know how to what this means, opening with Live Server, then you should probably watch the HTML crash course. I'll leave a link in the description, but I think I can just spare a minute to show you. So if you come to this extensions tab here, right, you can search for a plugin called Live Server. Okay, it's a plugin by Ritwik Day, so you can go ahead and install it. I already have it installed, but you can go ahead and install it. And when you do, right, on an HTML page, you can right click and you'll see the option to open with Live Server. When you click on that, it will open your page on the browser, right? So I have, this is a paragraph here. The advantage of that is that when you make changes to the page, it will automatically reload the page. So if I add maybe like an exclamation mark here and save, it will reload the page automatically. Okay. All right. So what I want to show you here is I want to teach you about CSS syntax. Okay. And syntax is just the way a language is written, right? The format in which a language is written. So for that, I'm just going to come after this document, after this title, okay, inside of the head tag, okay, before the closing head tag. So I'm going to come here and let me just give some space, right? And I'm going to say style. So I'm going to create an opening and a closing style tag. Okay, I want to use this to teach you CSS syntax. Okay, so now for us to add style to a page, okay, so for this page, right, what I want to do is I want to make this color, this paragraph, I want to make this paragraph here, I want to make it red. Okay, and we're going to use that to learn about CSS syntax. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we need to select this paragraph. Okay, so let me just show you how that works. Okay, I'll bring in a slide just to explain it first before I then do it. So let me just bring in this slide. Okay, so first we need to select just a minute there. Okay, great. Okay, so I'm assuming that this is a paragraph here, right? On the page, this is a paragraph. Okay, so when we want to style this paragraph, in this case we want to make it red, the first thing we need is we need to select the paragraph. Okay, and it's a P tag, so we're going to select the P. So I was saying that you need to first select this paragraph. Okay, so this P is known as a selector. Okay, and then you then put every other thing inside curly braces. Okay, so you see we have two curly braces, an opening and a closing curly braces, and then inside of the curly braces you then specify the property you want to style. Okay, so in this case we want to change the color, so the property is the color, and then you assign a value to that property. Okay, so and the value in this example is red. Okay, so this will then be the result of this right here. So this paragraph, this is a paragraph, is going to become red. Okay, so I'm just going to get rid of this out of the page so we can then do practical. So here I want to style this paragraph, so I'm going to select the paragraph, that's the selector P. I'll give a space and I'll create opening and closing curly braces. You know what I'm going to do right now? I'm going to bring it to another line. Okay, then I'm going to write the property I want to style. In this case I want to change the color. Okay, so I'll say color, and then I'll add a colon, and then I'll specify the value of the property, and in this case I want to make it red. Okay, then I'll close it with a semicolon. Okay, so this is how CSS syntax actually works. Okay, so for example, if you wanted to add several other styles to this paragraph, all you just need to do is to come to the next line and add another style. So something like this. Okay, you can add as many styles as you want. All you just need to do is come to the next line and add them. Okay, so yes, all you need to do now is go ahead and save and watch what happens to the document. So I'll save this, and the document has reloaded, and as you can see we now have a red paragraph. Okay, so when it comes to CSS syntax, right, what I've explained to you now is how you're going to write CSS. Okay, all right, so in the next one, let's see different ways we can write CSS. Okay, now there are 3 ways we can write CSS on a web document or a web page, right? So what I'm going to do is I'll just drag in this so that you can just see them listed out. So when you want to write CSS on a page, there are 3 ways you can do that. The first is called inline CSS, and we're going to see that we have internal CSS and we have external CSS. Now let me quickly say at this early stage that many of the times, right, you're going to be working with external CSS. In other words, this is the preferred option, right, when you're building projects. Okay, but then it's important, it's also good for you to know the the different types we have. Okay, So let's get practical and see how this actually works, right? So we have a paragraph here, and this paragraph is currently set to red. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to maybe delete this for now, and I'll save so that the paragraph becomes normal, so it's black. Okay, that's the default color. So we're going to start by talking about internal CSS, sorry, inline CSS. That's the first one. Okay, all right, inline CSS. So inline CSS is usually written inside of the element, okay, specifically the opening tag. So you see this paragraph we have here. Let me just give some space to, so this paragraph we have here now, I can write my CSS inside of this opening tag. You know the way you do that? You give a space and you say style, okay, equals, and then you add your quotes, right? Inside of that quote is where you then specify the style you want to write. Okay, so I'm going to say color, color, and then I'll add my colon, and then I'll say red. Okay, and then I'll add my semicolon to close it. Now if I go ahead and save, watch what happens here. I'll save this, and as you can see, the paragraph is truly red now. Okay, so this is what we call inline CSS because it's inside of the HTML element. Okay, but this is absolutely not recommended when it comes to writing styles for your project. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm definitely going to delete it. Okay, so I would, or no, I'm not going to delete it, I'm going to leave it so you have it. I would maybe just duplicate this line, so I would copy it, right, and I'll just come down here, paste it in, and then I'll get rid of the style in the second one. Okay, and I'll comment out the first one. So I'm going to use Emmet shortcut to comment out this first line, and it's control and /, right? So in the HTML lecture we taught you about comments, right? I just showed you a shortcut. If you're using a Mac, it's command and /. If I go ahead and save, this first one will not display on the page because it has been commented out, while the second one is what is being displayed on the page. So what I'm going to do is I'll just make it different. I'll say this is another paragraph, and I'll save, and as you can see, it's here. So the next one is internal CSS, and that's what we actually did when we explained CSS syntax, right? Where we said we added a P, and we said that the P was a selector, and then we opened curly braces, and inside of the curly braces we then specified the color, which is everything that is here. So let me just grab this guy. So we specify the color and we set it to red. Of course, we need to close it with a semicolon to make the syntax complete. If we go ahead and save, the paragraph becomes red. Okay, and then it's not just red, we can use any color, right? Any color that you actually know. So I can say maybe something like blue. So blue, and if I save that, the paragraph will be blue indeed. Okay, this one is known as internal CSS, right? So we've seen inline CSS, which is inside the element. We've seen internal CSS, which is on the HTML page but inside of this style tag, usually before the closing head tag, okay, which is this one here. All right, so the last method of adding CSS to a web page is external CSS, and that's what you're going to use most times when you build projects. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this guy here. Okay, you've seen it twice now, so I'm just going to delete it and save, and then, or maybe I'll just get rid of it totally. Okay, all right, great. And then before the closing head tag, I'm going to, or maybe before then, let me just create an external CSS file. So I'll just come here and I'll click on this icon to create a new file, and I'll call it style.css, or maybe styles.css plural. Okay, so now this is a CSS file I've created. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'll come here and I'll connect this new CSS file from the HTML page, and the way you do that is you use the link tag. So if I say link, that simply means that I want to link this CSS file to this HTML page. and the name of the CSS file is styles.css, and then if you check well, you see that they are on the same level just inside the folder. So I can simply just come here and say styles.css. Okay, and we have this rel which is equals to style sheet, or you can just leave that as it is, and then if I save, the file has been linked. But how do we know the file has actually been linked? Well, let's go to the styles.css and let's add some styles to the paragraph. So P, so just exactly what we did before, I'm going to set the color to red, and let's save and see what happens. And indeed the color is now red. Okay, if we change it to maybe something like purple and save, oh, it's purple, but you know, purple is not very distinctive, so I guess red is what we'll just go with, because red is very, you know, bright and sharp. Okay, so you see now that the style we have here is now taking effect on the page. Now, like I said earlier, external CSS is the industry standard. It's what is, you know, it's what you're going to do most of the time. Okay, all right. So but in the project, while we learn all the properties of CSS, I would not want to be going back and forth from, you know, one file to another. So what I'm going to use to teach you the CSS properties will be internal CSS. In other words, we're going to have a style tag and all of our styles will be inside it. Okay, all right, so that's what we're going to do in the project. So let's talk very quickly about how to add comments in CSS. In the HTML lecture, we saw that when you comment out anything on your HTML file, that elements will not be displayed on the page, and this is what exactly is going on here. So to add comment in CSS, for example, if I wanted to comment out this color, right, I'm just going to do that with the shortcut that Emmet, you know, provides, and that's control and /, and this is how you actually add comments in CSS. So a / and this asterisk, and then at the end of the statements you add an asterisk and a /. If I go ahead and save this now, you see that our paragraph has returned back to the normal color. Okay, but then the shortcut to do that is control and /. Okay, so I just wanted to quickly point out that, because we're going to be doing a lot of commenting out of styles as we learn in the project. All right, now let's talk about CSS selectors. Okay, now CSS selectors are just different ways we can access an element on the page. Okay, so far we've seen how we can access the elements directly. Okay, because when we added this style in our styles.css, we selected the paragraph tag. Okay, all right, now of course it's a good way to select an element on a page, but the only problem is if you have another paragraph tag, right? Let me just see another here, and you save that, right? All of the paragraph are going to have the same property. So if I come here and I uncomment out this color of red and save that, you see that both paragraph will have I don't think the page reloaded, so let me reload the page. Something is going on here. Color red, paragraph. Oh, styles.css, I think I added something there. Okay, so now you see that any paragraph you add is going to have a color of red. Okay, so it means we need a better way to be able to select elements on the page. We cannot just select it by the element's name itself. Okay, so that brings us to the topic of CSS selectors. Okay, so at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to bring all our styles and we're going to write our styles internally. Okay, so I don't want to be going back and forth. Okay, so I'll just close this styles.css. The most important thing is that you know how to connect an external style sheet, which is what we did here. Okay, then I would, you know, comment out this external style sheet, and inside here before the closing head tag, I'm just going to add the style tag, and this is where I'm going to be writing all my styles. Okay, for simplicity's sake. Okay, so permit me to also get rid of this one. Okay, great. So now we have two paragraphs, right? One says this is a paragraph, the other one says this is another paragraph. How do we add styles to this paragraph individually? Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is IDs. Okay, IDs is just a short form for identifier. Okay, so and any CSS selector you want to create, right, you need to put it inside the opening tag. Okay, the opening tag is actually what takes any attributes, selectors, and whatever. So I'm going to come here and then I'll say ID, right? I said it means identifier, right? And then I'm going to give this one, let's just say text 1. Okay, and then I'll save. Of course, it's not going to change anything, right? But if I come to my styles, right, and I want to select this text 1 and give it a style, well, what I just need to do is I just need to say hash. Okay, that's how you specify that you want to select an ID. So I'll say hash text 1 and I'll open my curly braces and then I'll say color and I'll set that color to red. I'll save that and watch what happens. Okay, so you see now that we have this first one, right, red, and the second paragraph is normal. Now there's one thing you need to know about ID. It should only occur once on a page, right? If you want to give a specific style to multiple elements, then an ID is not what you should use, because an ID is specific to a single element, right? It should only be used once on a page to target a single element. So if we want to target the two paragraph, what is the best CSS selector to use? That brings us to the second selector we'll talk about, which is classes. So what I'm going to do is I'll give a space here and I'll say class and then I'll just say text. Okay, now I'll come here and to select the class, or to tell the style that to tell the page that we are selecting a class, we need to use the dot and then we specify the name of the class. So I'll say dot text and then I'll open my curly braces and then I'll just grab this color and I'll paste it in here, but this time I'm going to make it blue. So I'll say blue, right, and I'll save and let's see what happens. Okay, so we have some conflict already, and I didn't want to talk about this conflict, but since we're already here, let's talk about it, right? So here we have a class of text. You know what, let me actually just grab this guy and put this class. You know, I said you can put a class on multiple elements, but an ID should be specific to just a single element. So I'll save this and let's see what happens. So you see here now that we have this second text blue while the first text is red. Why is that? That brings us to a topic I didn't want to talk about yet, but I have to talk about it now because we're here. The topic of CSS specificity. Okay, an ID is more specific than a class. So if you put an ID and a class on the same elements, the ID is going to take priority. Okay, that's one thing I just want to point out. Of course, if you are an absolute beginner, well, this may be kind of advanced, right? But since we're here, we just have to talk about it. So an ID is more specific than a class. Okay, I think we should even talk about the styles.css, right? So let's go from here. Now if I add a style to my styles.css file, right, and I add an inline, in fact let's actually do it here. So for this styles.css, I'm going to target the paragraph and I'm going to give it a color of let's see, what color can I give it? Orange. Orange is actually close to red. Let's say brown. I hope that's going to stand out. Okay, so I'm going to give it brown, and for these ones here, I'll comment out everything here. So let me just comment that out. Okay, I don't think it's commented out well, so let me do like this and I'll just comment out the properties. Okay, yeah, and I'll save. Okay, and then what I'll do is this link external style sheet, I would uncomment it out so that we can have access to the external style sheet. Okay, so you see now that the text is brown. Okay, Great. So what I want to do is I want to show you just a little bit about CSS specificity, right? Which CSS is going to take priority rather. So here I'm going to give it the paragraph a color of, I'm going to say red, okay, inside here, and then I would come here to maybe this first paragraph, right? This first paragraph, and I'll do an inline style. So I'll say style, and I'll set the color to blue. Okay, great. Now before I save this, well, I don't actually expect that if you're an absolute beginner you would know the answer, but the question is what do you think will be the color of this text when I save this? So we have three styles that we've set. One is on the external style sheet, we set the color to brown. The other one is on the internal style, we set the color to red, and the last one is on inline style, we set the color to blue. Well, let's save it and see. So I'm going to save this, okay, and permit me to comment out this last one so that we can just work with the first paragraph here. So you see now that the color is blue, okay. That is because you see the inline style has the highest priority. If you set, the style of a paragraph in the external style, and you come to the inline style and give it, a different color, that inline style is going to take priority. That's what you just saw happening here now. So you see now that the color was set to blue because inline style was actually what we set to blue. Now, what is next is in the line of priority is this guy here. So if I get rid of this inline style, what do you think will be the color? Well, like I said, it's going to be the internal style. So if I save this, you see now that it's now red. So despite the fact that we set this color on the external style to brown, the color here is red, and that is because when the browser starts to read your page, it starts from top, okay. So it comes here, it reads this external style that the color was set to brown. It says, okay, I'm going to set the color to brown, but as it keeps coming down reading the code on your page, it gets to this internal style, and then it sees that, oh, the color has been changed to red, and then it sets the color to red. That's exactly what happens. So the internal style is going to take priority, okay. And now if you go ahead and comment out this internal style, the color has been changed now to brown, okay. So I just wanted to quickly do a quick one to show you how that works, okay. So I'm going to get rid of this one now that you know about CSS priority, and I'm also going to close this guy, and let's comment out the external style sheet and go back to how we were working. All right, so we've seen IDs and classes, right? ID text, ID text1, class text, and we've seen how we can apply them. All right, great. So let's save that, and now we have our two paragraph, and I'm going to uncomment out these styles here and save. All right, so now you know how to use ID selectors and class selector, right? Now the next thing I want to show you is child selector. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually just get rid of all of these guys here, okay, and I am going to actually still get rid of this one, everything here, and I'm going to create a div. That div is going to have a class of text, okay. So we have a div with a class of text. Inside this div I'm going to add 3 paragraphs. So this one is going to say 1, and then I'll just duplicate it, and this one will say 2, and the last one will say 3, and then I'll save. So we're going to have 3 paragraph, 1, 2, 3. Great. Now these 3 paragraphs, right, they are inside of this div with a class of text. So what this makes them is the children of this div. So this div with a class of text is known as the parent container. So it's the parent of these 3 guys, these 3 paragraphs. These 3 paragraphs are known as the children. Now in CSS there is a way we can actually select the children, okay. So I'll come here to my styles, and first off I'll select the class. So I'll say dot text, that's the class, and what I want to select is the child, right? So I'll say nth, I'll give two what's it called, 2 colon, and then I'll say nth. Okay, I think it should be 1 colon, so I'll say nth child. Okay, so it's 1 colon, right? Nth child simply means that what number of child do you want to specify. So you see here we have 3 elements, 3 paragraph elements inside this div. So this is 1, 2, 3. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to specify the first one. So I'll say 1, and then I'll give a space and open that up, and then I'll set the color to red. If I save this now, watch what happens. Okay, so I'm actually getting everything, the color of everything to red, so it means I didn't do something correct here. So class.text, okay, so I actually see what's going on here, right? I was supposed to specify the paragraph. Okay, so here I'm just going to actually give a space, and then I'll specify that I'm targeting the paragraph element and that I'm targeting the first child. Okay, if I go ahead and save that, okay, great. So you now see now that we now have the first one as red and the remaining as the default color, which is black. So what I'm going to do is let me change this to 2 and let's save, and we have the second one. And if I change it to 3 and save, we have the third one. Great. So now let me do one more thing. So this is what the child selector actually, you know, this is how it works. So I'll duplicate this guy and say 4. Okay, so I want to show you something else, right? I want to select all the even number, so I'll say even. Okay, so even number being 2 and 4. So I'm going to save this and let's watch what happens. So you see we now have 2 and 4, and the color of those are red, the others are black. If I want to select the odd number, I'll just say odd and save that, and we now have 1 and 3 having the color of red, and of course the even number paragraph have the default color. Okay, so that's about child selector. Okay, now there's one more selector I would like to talk about, and that is the universal selector. Okay, the universal selector actually selects everything on the page, right? So I can come here, and the universal selector is selected using the asterisk sign. So if I say asterisk and I do like this, any style I put in here is going to affect everything on the page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to comment out this color of red and save, and inside of this universal selector I will give it a color of red. Watch what happens. Everything on the page becomes red. If I like, I can come outside of this div and add maybe a h1 tag and say heading 1, and if I save that, the color is going to be red. Okay, that's because we use this universal selector and we set the color to red. Now this universal selector is important in different ways. Okay, one of the key things that we use this universal selector for is to remove the margin and the padding. Oh, I've not talked about margin and padding, so I can actually talk about it now. Okay, so what I'm going to do is in the next one I'll start talking about spacing in CSS. Okay, how we add spacing to our elements. Okay, all right, so let's talk about spacing in CSS. All right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually get rid of this first div here that has a class of text, and for this second div that has a class of heading 1, I would actually just give it the class of text. Okay, all right, then I'm going to come to my styles here, and I'll just get rid of this guy. I don't need it, and I'll leave the universal style. Okay, maybe I'll just comment out the red so that we just have a neutral style. Okay, so now let me select the text class. Okay, like this. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is for this text class is I want to give it a border. Okay, so we've not actually used this CSS property before, so I'll say border, and I would specify the border. So this border, right, is going to have 3 properties. Okay, I'm actually using the shorthand notation. The first is the width. Okay, so here I'll just say 2px. Ps actually stands for pixels. Okay, so 2px stands for is the width of the border, and then I would select how the border style. Okay, and I want it to be solid. Okay, if this is the first time you're actually doing this, then it may look somehow, yeah, like it may look like what's going on here, but just calm down, it gets better. Okay, so I want the border style to be solid, and I want it to have a color of, let's just say, red also, and then I'll save that and watch what happens. So we now have a border around this heading. Okay, now ideally I could have broken this down up to border width, border style, and border color, but that would really take some time. So but I think I should actually just do it for the absolute beginner. So I'll say border hyphen width. Okay, I'll set it to 2 pixels, or maybe I should increase it to maybe like 5 pixels, px, and then I'll set the border style. So border style, and I'll set it to solid, and then I'll set the border color to red, or maybe I should actually change it now to blue so that we see that it's actually different. So I'll comment out the first one and save, and now you see that we have the border width, the border style, and the border color set. Okay, but instead of writing this 3 lines of code, right, we're repeating this word border so many times, it's better to actually just use this shorthand and say border 2 pixels, border style solid, border color red. Okay, all right, so permit me to maybe I should actually just comment this one out and use the first one. I'll save that, and we're gonna have a red border. Okay, so there's something else we can actually do, and that is border radius. Border radius is going to add like some kind of curve around the edges of the border. Okay, so if I say border radius of, let's just do 5 pixels first, I'll save that, and you see now it's a little bit curved at the end. Okay, if I do border radius of, let me just make it 50 pixels, let's see what that does. So you see it now makes it very curved at the end. Okay, but of course that's not what we want, so 5 pixels is fine. All right, so now when it comes to spacing in CSS, there are 2 things that we actually should have in mind. The first is padding, and the second is margin. For us to understand the padding and margin concept, I would need to have 2 2 h1 text with the class of text. Okay, so I'll duplicate this guy, so we now have 2. So I'm just going to make this heading 2 just to make it different. I'll save that, and you see we now have 2. Okay, as a matter of fact, I can even make it 3, so I can just say heading 3, and I'll save. So we have 3 of these. Great. Now what I'm going to do is, for this second one, the second heading, I'm going to give it another class. So an element can have more than one class, right? It doesn't have to be one class. So to give it another class, what you need to do is just add give a space after the first class and add your different class. So I'll just say text hyphen 2. Okay, just to make it different. Okay, I didn't put a hyphen. I would like to add a hyphen, text hyphen 2. Apparently my hyphen. Okay, so I say text hyphen 2, so that's great. Now what we're going to do is, I'm going to actually copy this text hyphen 2, and I'm going to target it here. So I'll say dot text hyphen 2. I'll give it space and open up. Okay, now inside this text hyphen 2 is where I'm going to explain the padding and the margin property. So let's go ahead and do padding. Okay, now what is padding? Padding is the space inside of the border. Okay, so it's best for me to just actually do it, and then you see to understand. So here I'm just going to say padding of 10 pixels, and then I'll save. Now watch what happens. Great. Now do you see now that inside of this border we now have more space compared to the first and the second one? Let me make this 50 pixels just so that it's very large. Watch what happens. So you see there's so much space inside of the border, unlike the first and the second. That's what padding actually does. Using the border as a reference, padding is going to add space inside of that border. Okay, great. Now let's see margin. So I'll say margin, and I'm going to do margin of, let me just start with 10 pixels, 10 px, and then I'll save. Watch what happens. You're not going to appreciate it so much on the top and bottom, but what actually happened is that it has added space outside of the border. So you see now that this border starts here, while this one starts, a little bit further from the edge of the page. But of course we can actually make it 50 pixels so that we can appreciate it very well. So I'll save that and watch what happens. So you see now that we now have some space outside of the border. Okay, so padding in relative to the border, right? Padding will add some space within the border, while margin will add space outside of the border. Okay, so those are the two very important properties that we use when we want to add space in our web page. Okay, all right, so great. Now that we've seen the concept of padding and margin, and even the border, what we're going to do next is we're going to see a very important CSS concept called the box model, and we're going to do that very briefly. Now I would like to now talk about box model, the concept of the box model. But before I do that, there's something I probably should mention, and that is the fact that for the padding and the margin, right? For the padding, let's start from the padding. We gave it a padding of 50 pixels for text 2. Okay, this 50 pixels, what this means is that it's going to add padding to the top, the left, the bottom, and the right. Okay, so we can actually specify the values for each of these. Okay, so I can say padding and top. Okay, and maybe what I'll do is first I'll comment out this one. So padding top, let me just do 50. So I'll say 50 pixels px, and I'll save and watch what happens. Okay, so aside the margin that we set, which I can comment out, right? So for padding top, we see that we just have a padding on the top, right? So we can duplicate that 4 times, and we can make this padding let's just say right, and we can make this padding bottom, and this last one is going to be padding left. Okay, so you see now that it now adds padding all around. So but instead of doing this one after the other, you can just say padding 50 pixels, and it will add on the top, bottom, left, and right. Okay, now also I'm going to get rid of these guys, just get rid of them. Now also, if you wanted to add like different padding values to a single padding property, you can add them like one after the other. So all you just need to do is add the 4 values. So I'll say padding, this first one is going to be 50. I'll make the second one maybe 20 pixels, and I'll make the third one is going to be maybe 50 as well, and the fourth is going to be 20 pixels. Sorry, let me add the 20. Okay, so now what's going on here? This looks very very unorganized. Okay, but I'll explain it. So the first value 50 actually starts from the top, the second value goes to the right, the third one is for the bottom, and the last one is for the left. Okay, so it's top, right, bottom, left. So if I go ahead and save this, watch what happens. Right, suddenly we have padding here, top and bottom, and left and right is 20. Okay, so you may not really appreciate the padding on the right because we have more space on the right, but that's how it works. Okay, now the same thing I explained for the padding also applies to the margin. So you can do margin top, margin right, margin bottom, margin left, and you can do a shorthand to specify the margin also. Okay, so having said that, I'm going to take this back to just 50 pixels. Okay, so that I will then go ahead and explain the box model. So I'll comment out this guy, so we have our margin. Now the box model is actually a concept that describes the total width and height of an element on the page, okay? And the box model contains four items or four properties. The first is the content itself. So this paragraph here of heading 2 is actually the main content, and then next we have the padding around it, and then we have the border, okay? So if you want to calculate the total height of the element on the page, well, you're going to factor in the heading, the padding, and the border, okay? But for the box model, we can also include the margin. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and I'll inspect, or maybe okay, I'll right click, I'll expand the browser, I'll right click and I'll inspect the element here, okay? So what I can do is I'll click on this arrow here, this I hope you can see this arrow here. I'll click on it and I'll select this heading 2 so that I can inspect the heading 2. Now what I can do is if I scroll down on this styles panel here, you see that we now have this diagram here, and for this diagram we have values around it, okay? If you can see, we have values around it. Maybe I should actually move this to the right. So let me move this to the right. Okay, great. I think this is better. Okay, so now you can see now that we have this diagram here, and this actually explains the box model. See, inside here you see that we have the width of the element, okay? That's 634 by 37 pixels, right? And then see the padding, you see the padding is set to 50, and that's exactly the padding we set, if you remember correctly. So if I minimize this guy, you see that we set the padding to 50 pixels. And then after the padding we have this border, and the border is 1.993, and if you remember correctly, we set the border to 2 pixels. So the last is the margin, so we have the margin also 50 here. So basically the box model actually helps us to it helps us when we are trying to lay out our page, right? And it helps us to be able to calculate the total width and the total height of the page, okay? So but what I can do to further explain it is, what I'm going to do is I'm going to let's see, let me close this up just a little bit, and I'm going to get rid of the third heading, and for this one I'll just say I'll give this a class of text1, so text -1, right? And let me save that and see what I have on the page. Okay, great. So we have text2 and text1. Okay, so I'm going to duplicate this text2 and change this to text1, save, so that we now have, I think the 50 pixels is actually just too much for now, so I'm going to reduce it to maybe like 30 pixels. So I'll just say 30 and save, so we have something a little great. So this is better. Okay, so I've set it to 30 pixels each. Now what I will do for both of them is that I'll give both of them a width and a height. Okay, right, I'll come here and I'll say I'll give it a width of, I'll do 300 pixels, sorry, px, and I'll give it a height of 100 pixels, right? And I'm going to just copy this guy here and I'll paste it here, right? And then I'll save. Great. So well, I think the width of 300 pixels is actually too much, so let me reduce it. Not like it's too much, the browser is very okay, so it's better like this. I'll shrink the browser much later. Okay, so now we have a defined width and a defined height. Okay, we also have the padding and the margin of 30 pixels. Okay, great. So what I will do now is I'm going to comment out the padding for box 1. Watch what happens. I'll comment out the padding for box 1 and save, and as you can see, box 1 is now smaller. Why? Because we've actually commented out the padding, and remember that the padding actually contributes to the total width and the height of the entire element. Okay, now let me now introduce you to a property called box sizing. So what I can do is I'll come here and I'll say box sizing, and I'll set it to border box, right? The default is actually content box, but I'll set mine to border box because that's what we need. And let me save that. Right, I've saved it. Have I? Okay, I haven't. I've saved it, and you don't actually see any change. But what I can do is I'll copy this guy, this box sizing, and I'll paste it in here. Now what this box sizing will do is that it will look at the total width that we've set, and it will adjust the elements irrespective of the padding. So I'll save this guy and watch what happens. So you see now that it has adjusted the, irrespective of the padding that we commented out in the first text one, it has adjusted the total height and the total width, that, and it's now relative to these guys we've set here. Okay, so the box sizing is very, the box sizing property is very important when it comes to laying out our page, so that we don't have different width and height for elements that we want to look similar. Okay, we're going to see that when we start designing, right? So but does that mean that we're going to be adding this box sizing property to each and every one of the elements? Well, that's going to be very cumbersome, and it's a bad practice actually. What I've actually even done here is not what we're going to do when we start building websites, right? Instead of saying text 1 and text 2 and giving them the same CSS property, we're going to use a single class for them. Okay, so but then this box sizing property, I'm actually going to just copy it, and this is where we're going to paste it inside our universal selector. Okay, so I'll come here, I'll paste it in, and then I'll save. And then what that means is that I can come here and get rid of the box sizing property, right? And then I'll save, and as you can see, they still maintain their width and height of 300 and 100 respectively. Okay, so the box model is something I actually take more time to explain in the course, right, in my HTML course, right? So if you actually want an in-depth explanation, like a more detailed explanation, you can check that out. Okay, but I really hope that it's clear and that you at least do understand it here. Okay, all right, so in the next one we're going to look at how we can format text in CSS. So let's look at formatting text in CSS. Okay, so what I gotta do is I just gotta get rid of all of this, and I gotta add a paragraph tag, and I'm just gonna add some dummy text. So I'll say lorem, and I'll just add 20 dummy text. I'll hit the tab key, and Emmet will generate some dummy text for me, right? So I'll get rid of all of these styles here, right? And I'll just leave the box model, the universal selector, and here I'll just use the element selector to add some styles, right? So before I go ahead and start formatting this text, right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a font family from Google. Okay, or maybe not yet, right? So first let's talk about how to format this text. So there are different properties we can format in this text. The first is, let me just save this file so that we can see the text on the page. So we have some text here. So let me start with the font size, right? Font size is just the size of the text, and the default size is 16 pixels. So if I save that, you will not notice any change on the text. Okay, but let's make it maybe something like maybe 14, and you see that it becomes a little bit smaller. Okay, right, so there's the font size, there is font width, right? So font width, and for now I'm just going to set it to bold, so that will make the text bold. Okay, which is definitely not what we want if we want to, you know, have paragraphs. So I'll comment it out. We can set the color of our text, so I'm just going to set it to red, you know, and you see now the color becomes red. We can set the alignment of our text. Okay, so I'll say something like text align, and it can either be left is actually the default, so left, it wouldn't change anything, right? So if there's left, that means there can also be right, and watch what happens. And then there can also be what is known as justify, and watch what happens. So it's just like it happens on Microsoft Word. Okay, we can set the line height of our text. So I'm going to say line height, and line height is just the space between each line. So let me just do something like 2 and save, and you see that it has increased, right? So I'll set it back to 1, and it has gone back to the I think the default. Okay, so basically that's the line height property. Okay, then there is also this property they call text decoration, and you can set it to underline. Let's see what that does. So you see now the text is underlined. You can set it to none for a case where we are styling a link. Okay, there's something there's one more property I want to talk about when styling text. Font family. Okay, so there is font family, and you see my code editor is already giving me different font families, so I'm just going to select one. Okay, so this one I selected. Now what this means is that it will check the user's computer. If the user has this font family, it will select this. If not, it will fall back to this. If not, it will just look for any sans serif font and apply it. So if I save that, you see that it has changed the way the text displays. Okay, so that's about it. But also we can actually get fonts from external sources. For example, Google Fonts is a very common use case. So what I can do is I can just come here and say fonts.google.com. that's the website. Oh, that should be fonts.google.com. Okay, great. So this is Google Fonts, right? So you can actually, it's a library of fonts, so many fonts. You can select any one you want. There's one I particularly like, and that's the, come on, I can't remember the name of this font. Anyway, I'm just going to select this Roboto font, right? Okay, I think I remember, Poppins. Okay, so Poppins. Okay, yeah, so this is it, right? There are quite a number of fonts I use. If I let me check my oh, this is not the file I normally use when I work. Okay, all right, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you how to select a font. So what I'm going to do is I'll click on this Poppins, right, and it's going to open up, and then you're going to need to select the font weight. Okay, so font weight, you remember we set the font weight here to bold. So where is it? We set it to bold now, and then we commented it out. So font weight is just the weight of the text. Okay, so here you're going to need to select. So if you I think I'm just going to go, I'll start from maybe 300. So you see 300 light. So I'll just click on select this style. Okay, so it will add that font weight, and then I'll click on 400 regular, and then I would also click on maybe something bolder, maybe 500, and I think maybe if they have 700, I'll go with 700. Okay, so they have 700. Okay, so I'll just go with 700. What that will do is that it will add all of those font weights, so you can actually select those numbers when you are writing your CSS. Okay, there are two ways you can import this. One is to actually add this link here. So I can just copy this link here, Control C, and I can paste it in the head of my document. Okay, so I'll just go with, just after the title here, I'll paste that in and save. Okay, so here I can then set the font family to Poppins. Okay, it should be written, okay, so yeah, so you see Poppins and then sans serif. So what I can do is I can just actually copy this guy and replace this one, or I'll comment this one out, and then I'll just replace it with Poppins. And let me come to my document before I save, and I'll go ahead, come on, this should not be, let me just make this black. Okay, I'll go ahead and save and watch the changes. So you see it has actually changed the font family to Poppins. Okay, so that's how you can, that's one way you can incorporate Google Fonts into your file. So but then if you also go back to the website, you'll see that you can also import it. So if I click on this import, what you can do is you can import this inside your external style, right? Okay, not, you can both use it in your external style and in your internal style. So what I can do is I can actually just copy this guy, right? And what is it? Let me show you how it's being used. So if I go to my styles.css, right, at the very top, right, at the very top, I'll paste that in, right, and I can use this in my file, in this CSS file. Okay, so those are the two ways you can actually use it. So well, I think that's about it for the basics for, you know, formatting text. Okay, so what we're going to do next is we're going to see how we can format buttons. All right, so now let's just see how we can style a simple button. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just get rid of this stuff here, and I'm just going to add a button. So button, and you know what, I'm going to add a div. So this div is going to have a class of b, let's see, I don't even know what to say. I'll just say intro, and inside this div I'm just going to add a button. So button, and then I'll save, Ctrl Z. This button is actually an HTML element that will say get started, and then I would give this button probably a class of btn. Okay, so now for this button, right, I'm going to, you know, say .btn, and let's just see how we can style the button. So I'll save that, and let me just close all of this stuff I'm not using anymore. Okay, so this is just a simple button we have. I'll just style the button exactly where it is. Okay, so here I would say I'll give it a let's start with the font size. So I'll say font size of, I can maybe do 1.6 rem, sorry, 1.16 pixels. We've not talked about rem yet, so 16 pixels. Save that. Okay, so you see the text is a little bit bigger, and let me do some padding. So for the padding, let me just do 5 pixels on the top and bottom, then 10 pixels on the left and right. That's what this means. So what this means is that it will give it 5 pixels on the top and the bottom, 10 pixels on the left and the right. Okay, then let's do, you know what, let's just give this button, well, I don't want to give it a margin because, but I actually want to center it. So to center the button, right, this intro class, so let me just do intro. This should be .intro, by the way, and I'm going to give it text align, and I'll set it to center. Let me see. Okay, so yeah, so the button is in the center, right? And learning how to center stuff, right, is something that should actually have a lecture on it, should be a lecture on its own. Okay, there are different ways you can actually center stuff, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a link in the description to a video I dedicated to, you know, showing you how to center anything with CSS. Okay, so but then let's continue styling our button. So we're going to give this button a background color. So I'll just say background color, and I'll just give it a background color of purple. Okay, let's save that and see. Okay, so now let's give it the color of the text. We're going to set it to white. I'll save that. We're going to give this button, we're going to set the border, right? So if you click on this button, right, you see that there's a border on around it. So I want to remove that border, so I'll set the border to none. Save that, and that border will be removed. Then I'll set the border radius, which is the curve around the button, to 5 pixels. Save that, and okay, then since we now have what's it called, this font from Google, I'll set the font weight of the button to, let's maybe try 400. So font size, I'll come here and say font weight, and I'll just do 400 and save. Oh, it's not going to take effect because we've not actually set the font size. Now, usually when you want to set the font size on your HTML page, you need to set it on the body. So this body is what contains everything here, right? So I'll come here and then I'll say the body, and then I'll set the font size, sorry, font family rather. So font family, and it's going to be, how was it set? I think it's Poppins and sans serif. Okay, I think that's how it was actually set. So but let me save it and see if it changes anything. So I don't think I noticed any change. So let me quickly check how that was inserted. So I did my due diligence and I actually inserted it the right way. So let me just paste it. So it's, yeah, it's the same except for my double quotes, which I don't think is a factor. So I'll save that, and I don't actually see any difference. So maybe what I need to do is I need to actually paste this into this guy here, and let's see if it changes anything. Okay, great. So it has actually changed. So I needed to have the font family in the button as well. Okay, great. So now I think our button is great, except that we can add some properties. So I want it such that when I put my mouse on the button, it looks like it's clickable. So to do that, we're going to set the pointer. I'm coming. Let me just think about the property. We're going to set the cursor, right? The cursor, we're going to set it to pointer. If we save that, now if I hover on the button, it looks like it's clickable. You see, the mouse has turned to like a hand, right? Now there's one thing I want to introduce you to now, and that is the concept of pseudo classes, right? So a pseudo class is just an effect that we can add on an HTML element for maybe when we hover on it. So I'm going to say .btn, and the way you add a pseudo class, you add a colon and then you say hover. That's the pseudo class we want to add. So for this pseudo class, basically what I want to change is the background color when I hover on the button. So I'll paste that in, and I will change the background color to orange and save, or maybe orange red, and I'll save that and watch what happens when I hover on the button. You see the color has changed, right? But the color changes so fast, like it's not smooth, it's robotic, right? The way I see it. So what we can do is we can set a property known as the transition. The transition will, help us to make the change in color a little bit smoother. So on the main element here, I'll come here and set the transition, and I'll set it. I'll just specify exactly what I want to the property I want to change, which is the background color. So I'll say that if the background color is going to be changed, right, I want it to occur over maybe like 0.3 seconds. Okay, and then I'll save. Now watch what happens if I hover here. You see now it's a little bit smoother than previously. Okay, but instead of even saying the background color, supposing I wanted to change other properties, right, I can actually just come here and say that instead of saying the background color here, I'll just say all. In other words, any property that you change, make sure that it's changed smoothly. If I come and hover here, you see that it still changes smoothly. Okay, so that, I think that's about it for how to create a button. There are so many amazing things you can do when you create when you are styling a button. Okay, all right, so we're going to go to the next one. So what we're going to do now is we're going to see how we can style links. Okay, so instead of having a button here, I'm going to actually get rid of this, and I'm going to add a link tag. So this link tag is not going to go anywhere, so I'll just say home, and I'll just add a hash here just so that it doesn't go anywhere, and here I'll say about. Okay, so I'll save that, and let's see what happens on the page. So we now have this home and about. This doesn't look good, right? So what we can do is for this link, right, to target this link, exactly this link inside of this intro, right, I can come here, and instead of saying this .btn, I'll say .intro and a, which is the link tag. Okay, if I save that, well, it will give it all of the styles of the button. So what do we know? We do not want some styles here like the background color, so I'll get rid of the background color. Same here, right? Let me save that. and now we have the link, but the link is white. So what I can do is I can make the link, let's just make it black and save, and we now have two link items that are black. Okay, but then we don't want this underline on the link. So what I can do is I can say the text decoration, and I'll set it to none. I'll save that, and the underline will be deleted from the link. Okay, all right. So another thing we can do is we can set a hover pseudo class for the link, right? So for example, I can change the color of the link to something else when you hover. So I'll paste that in and change it to, let's just say, orange red, and I'll save that. And now watch what happens when I hover on the link. So when I hover, oh, this is still the btn, right? So what I need to do is I need to actually copy this guy and paste it in here. So we have dot intro and then the link inside hover pseudo class. So if we save that and we hover on the link, you see now that it changes to, I think the 0.3 seconds is too long, so let's just say 0.2 seconds or so. So, or maybe even 0.1. Okay, so you see that it changes when I hover on it. Okay, so that's a way you can actually style the link, right? There's another thing we can do, which is create a pseudo element. Okay, but I think that's a little bit beyond the basics for beginners. Okay, so I may not actually go into that. I go into that a lot in many of my tutorials. Okay, how to create pseudo elements and work with pseudo elements. But by and large, this is a good way to work with links. And for a link, you don't actually need this cursor pointer. So let me comment this out, because a link by default is clickable. So you see it still appears clickable. Okay, so I think that's enough for a beginner when it comes to styling link. Of course, for the link we don't need the border as well. So if I save that, nothing changes. Okay, great. All right, so we're going to go to the next one, which is positioning in CSS. So let's talk about positioning in CSS. So for this one to work, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to, I'll just change this to, text. So I'll just say paragraph, and here I'll just say hello, and the second one I'll just say hello world. Okay, and I think I want to give this a class of, so since I want both of them to have this class, I'll say class of, let's just say text, and I'll then say text1. Okay, I'll change this one to text2, and then I'll save. So what I got to do now is I got to get rid of all of this link property here, and for the intro I'm going to get rid of the text align, and I'll just give it a border. So for the border, I'll give it 2 pixels solid and red. Save that, and we have a border around it. Then I'll give it some padding. Should I give it some padding? Oh no, I don't need some padding. That's fine like this. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about two kinds of positioning here. The first is going to be absolute positioning, and the second is going to be relative positioning. Okay, now we have two paragraphs inside of this div with the class of intro. How can we position these elements wherever we want? Okay, so to do that, we are going to first give this intro a position of relative. Okay, all right, so we save that. Nothing changes actually, but then if we then come to the child elements inside of the paragraph, so we're going to start with text1, right? So I'll come down here, I'll say dot text1, and I'll set the position to absolute. What this will do is that it will make this text1, it will position it wherever we specify, inside of this box. So let me save that, and the first thing that happens is that it has taken it away from the flow, the normal flow that it had. So we can then come here and then specify. So what I've got to do is I'll say that from the right, I want it to be 20 pixels from the right, so 20 px. What do you think that would do? So let's save, and now you see hello is now 20 px from this point here. Okay, all right. Now you can also position it from the top, bottom, left. So let's just do, say, from the top. I'll say from the top I want it to be another, let's just say 50 px, and save. And you see that from the top here it has pushed it 50 px downwards. Okay, so that's how the relative and absolute positioning works. If you want to position a child element anywhere inside of its parent container, first off you need to give the parent container a position of relative, and you can then give the child a position of absolute and specify how you want it to be positioned inside of the container or relative to the container. Do you understand? So, but of course I will not want to do 50, maybe 20, and save. And you see, so you can position it anywhere, right? You can change this to left, save, and it will move it here anywhere you want in the page, okay, or in the box. Okay, so that's how it works. So the next kind of position I want to show you is the fixed positioning. So for that, I'm going to come out and create another paragraph, and here I'll say fixed, and I'll give it a class of fixed. Okay, so what I got to do is I'll come here, right? I'll select the fixed class, and I'll say position and set it to fixed. If I save that, so we still have it where it is, but then I can then specify exactly where I want it to be. So if I say from the bottom, I want it to be let's just say 20 pixels from the bottom. It's going to be 20 pixels from the bottom of the body of the page, right? So let's save that and see what happens. Voila, so you see it's now here. Okay, then let's say maybe from the right, we want it to be, so right, we want it to be 10 pixels from the right, so 10 px, and save. You see, so it's now here. So instead of saying fixed, if I make this let me say back to top, which is something you see on websites, right? So if I say back to top and save, then I come here, let me reduce this to 10 pixels, and let me give it a border, so, or a background. So I'll say background color, and let me just say red, and save. Okay, of course I got to give it some padding. This is really ugly. 5 pixels. Don't worry, I can do better. It's because we're just learning with this stuff. So 5 pixels, and then I'll give it a color of white. So white, and save. Okay, so this is just a back to top what's it called, like a back to top button. Really, it should actually be an icon. But you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to come right inside of this page. Let me just come here, and let me just add a paragraph. And this paragraph, I'm going to add some dummy text. So I'll say lorem, and let's just say 1000, and save. So it's going to add a, oh sorry, lorem 1000, and okay, great. So it's going to add, I hit the tab key and it added a lot of text. So I'll save that, and it's going to just add so much text on the page. Now watch what happens if I keep scrolling, right? You'll see that this guy we set the position to fixed actually stays fixed. Okay, so that's the difference between absolute positioning, relative positioning, as against fixed positioning. So if I keep scrolling, it stays there, right? And if I want it such that when you click on this guy it goes to the top, we can actually set that also. Okay, so but I just wanted to use that to explain the concept of fixed positioning. So we've seen 3 kinds of positioning: absolute positioning, relative positioning, and fixed positioning. All right, so next I'm going to show you how you can add a background image to your page. So what I can do is I'll just do Ctrl Z on this one, and let me get rid of all of this positioning thing, the fixed positioning specifically, and let me save this guy. Okay, so we have this guy that says hello world, and I think I will even get rid of the second one and all of this. So here I'll just say hello world, Okay, let me add an exclamation mark, and here I'll just get rid of all of these guys. I don't need them anymore. Great. So I'll save, and we now have this guy here. So what we can do is, for this intro, I'll set a background image on the intro, right? So here I'll just come here and I'll say background image, and to add a background image you have to specify where that image is, and you use the URL property. And then I have added an image folder from our HTML lecture. So this is the image folder, and then it has all of this image. What I'm interested in is this laptop.jpg. I'll use it as a background image. So here let me just close this so that I have space. So here I'll go into the images folder I just created, and then I'll specify the laptop.jpg, and then I'll save. Watch what happens. So we now have the image inside. Of course, because what's it called, because the height of this intro div is just very small, that's why we just have this small background image displaying. So but what we can do is, you can actually set the height. So I can say height, for example, and I can set the height to, let's just say 300 pixels, for example, and I save that, and watch what happens. So we now have more of the image being displayed. Okay, so the most important thing is, I just wanted to show you how you can set the background image. Okay, so there are other properties for the background image that you can set. You can set the background wait, let me just see something. Let me expand this. Okay, great. So you see here that we now have, this is the image. It's already repeating itself, right? Because the size of the image is not up to the width of this guy here. So what I can do is, I can bring this up here, and I can set the background repeat, and I'll set it to no repeat, and I'll save. Okay, and watch what happens. So you see now that it's just taking up the normal size here. Another thing you can do is, well, let me just comment out this and see how it displays. Okay, let me see, let me make this 100% and actually see if it changes anything. So 100%, I'm just experimenting here. Okay, so I'll set it back to 300 pixels and no repeat. I'll save that. Okay, so let me show you some other properties you can set. You can set the background size, and you can set it to cover. Okay, so if you set it to cover, what that will do is that it will just find a way to position the image such that it covers the whole width of the container. Okay, so we've seen background repeat, we've seen background size. There's also background position, and I think we have auto. I can't exactly remember the various properties for background position. Okay, so maybe for now I'll just get rid of it. Okay, but background repeat, background size, those are properties we use every now and then. Okay, let me see, there are some other ones. Background okay, there's background attachment for when we want to have a kind of parallax effect. Okay, so let me show you background attachment, and I'll set it to fixed XED. I don't think it will actually, okay, I think for us to appreciate the background attachment, I have to add some more content. So I'll come here, and below the div I'll just add a paragraph, and I'll do some lorem text of 1000. I'll save that. Oh, that should be tab, and I'll save that. Okay, so now what will happen is, watch what happens when I try to scroll. So you see the background image is actually fixed, right? And just watch what happens. I'll try to scroll again. You see, yeah, exactly. So that's what the background attachment actually does to your image. Okay, I think we can actually stop here for the background image property. So let me just get rid of all of this. Okay, so as we start building project, you're going to appreciate many of these CSS properties that we're working with right now. Okay, so in the next one we're going to talk about flexbox and the grid layout. All right, now before we talk about Flexbox and Grid, let's talk about media queries, and I think this is actually going to be the last concept we talk about. So when we talk about media queries, right? I think the best example we need is the, let's just have some text. So I'll get rid of all of this background image stuff. Okay, let me save that, and we'll just have our hello world, right? So to add a media query, what's this media query concept? What is it? Right, so media query is a concept in CSS that helps us build responsive websites or responsive layouts. For example, there may be an image that when it looks on the desktop, right, on the desktop version of your site, or when your website is being viewed on the desktop, the image looks perfect. But when it comes to the mobile view, the image gets all distorted and stuff like that. So for something like that, you're going to need the media query to either attach another image or change the shape or the properties of the image. Okay, something like that, different layouts. So I'm sure you've probably noticed that when you view some websites on a desktop, it looks different from when you view them on a mobile device. So that's made possible with the help of media query. So what we're going to do is we're just going to target this item here, this text here, and we're going to change the property when it's on a mobile device. So this is a mobile width. If I come here and I right click and I inspect, just watch what happens. Okay, I'm going to shrink this up. So what happens is that if you look at this Chrome console, Chrome developer tool here, there are different what's it called, there are different dimensions here. So at this point here, we are let me just start from here, right? My Chrome is on dark mode, that's why. So if I click on this first point here, you see I'm on this laptop with a width of 1024 pixels. If I come here, it's on tablet 768. I come here, it's on mobile 425. Okay, so but most times for mobile width, what we do is we just target from 600 and below. Okay, so I'll close this console tool, and I'll show you how you can change the color of this guy when it's on a mobile device. So here at the bottom, just before my closing tag for my style, I'm going to add a media query. The way you add it, you say at media. Okay, and the user is going to view your website on a screen, so I'll say screen, right? And then I'll then say that I want to set a new property when the width is 600 pixels. Okay, so for that I'll say max width, so max hyphen width, and I'll tell you what that means, and I'll set the max width to 600 pixels. I'll come out here and open my curly braces. Now what does this max width mean? What this max width means is that from 600 pixels and below, okay, in other words 600, 599, 598, so 600 pixels and below, these styles will take effect. So but for us to fully appreciate the style, what I'm going to do is I'll set a style for this text. So let me copy it, and I'll just come outside of the media query, and I'll say dot text, and I'll give it a font size of, let's just say 20 pixels. Okay, and let's give it a color of blue, or let's just say red. Okay, so those are the two things I'll just set. Of course it will be 20 pixels and red. Okay, great. So now what I'll do is, let me expand this guy a little bit, so just so that it's more than 600 pixels. Okay, at this point it's more than 600, I know from experience. So what I will do is I'll copy this text and I'll come inside of this media query and paste it in, right? Let me save it so that I just format a little bit. Now what I want to do is I want to just change only the color, so I don't want to do anything with the font size. So I'll just delete the font size here, and for this color I'll change it to blue, right? And I'll save. Okay, oh and I was just bragging that, oh, I know the width. Okay, So apparently this 600 pixels is less than, so I'm going to reduce this to, let's just say 500 pixels and save. Oh, something is wrong. Max width means 500 pixels and below. So let me drag this. So 500 pixels apparently. So let me make this 400 pixels, okay, just so that I know that I'm in the mobile width. Okay, great. So I'm going to expand this. Now when it is more than 500 pixels, watch what happens. The text is actually red. However, when we get to 400 pixels, the text will change to blue. That's because of this media query we set here, when we said that anything that when the max width is 400 pixels, in other words, anything 400 pixels and less and below, this is going to take effect. So if I come here and I start shrinking, watch what happens. So when it gets to 400 pixels, the text change. Let's even make it a little bit spicy. So I'm going to come here. I don't need this position relative. I'm not using it anymore. So let me just grab this intro here, and I'm also going to paste that in here, and I'll change the border color to blue as well and save. So let's expand. So when you expand, it's red, and as you get to 400 pixels, it becomes blue. Okay, so everything here only takes effect when you are at 400 pixels and below. Okay, so that's basically the concept of media queries, that at different device width you can change the style of your page. That's what media query is. Okay, so in the next one we're going to talk about Flexbox and the grid system. All right, so talking about Flexbox and the grid system, basically they are just two concepts that we use to organize the layout of our page. Flexbox is a two-dimensional layout. Grid system is it three-dimensional layout? I hope I'm not forgetting. Anyway, I have crash courses on Flexbox and grid, okay, because they are actually bulky. Not that bulky, but then they are so important that I actually did a crash course on each of them individually. Okay, I think about maybe 30 minutes or so. But I'm just going to do a quick one on Flexbox just to show you what I mean when I say it helps us lay out our page. So what I'll do is, let me just get rid of all of this media. Oh, well, I can leave the media query for now, right? Okay, so what I gotta do is, for this text, instead of just saying hello world, I'm gonna add some lorem ipsum. So I'll just say lorem maybe 20. I'll hit tab, and then I'm gonna have two of these. Okay, so two, and then I'll save. Okay, great. Now this text is just too large, so I'm going to make this font size of maybe 14, and of course I don't want the color to be red. No, I don't want it to be red. And then I'll get rid of this guy. I'll save. Okay, great. So this is what we have, right? So permit me to shrink this up just a little bit and expand this. Okay, now Flexbox helps us to organize the layout of our page. Grid system also does that, right? And they do that in different ways. So what we are going to do is, I'm going to come to this markup here and I'll just explain. So we have this intro, which is the parent. Inside of it we have two divs, which are the children. Whenever you have divs inside, whenever you have children elements, you can set Flexbox property on the parent and it will affect the children, the way they display. So what I'll do is, I'll come to my intro and I'll set the display to flex, and then I'll save. Watch what happens. So you see, now we now have the children displaying side by side. Okay, all right, so basically I just wanted to show you that I'm not going to go deep into Flexbox. I'm going to leave links in the description to my Flexbox and my grid crash course. You should absolutely, I recommend you check them out, right? But you see now that we now have these guys displaying side by side. Okay. All right. So of course, if you shrink this guy up, when it gets to this mobile width, it doesn't look very great. So of course, in this I'm already going deep into the flexbox, right? But in your media query, I can come here and set a property known as the flex direction, and I'll set it to column and save. And what will happen is that it will just make it will stack it one on top of the other, like in the column. Okay, so I will not want to go into flexbox and the grid layout in this tutorial so that it's not too long, but I'll leave links in the description. I recommend you actually check those links out. Okay. All right, so if you've gotten to this stage, then I am definitely sure that you've learned one or two things about CSS, and from what I've taught you here, you should be able to approach building websites. And I have a lot of website tutorials on my channel. If you want a more in-depth course, then you can check out xenotrustacademy.com and check out my web design course or my JavaScript course. Okay. All right, thank you so much for watching this tutorial. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, and see you in another video.